Hey, Bramborough back with some Grand Tactician Civil War Union campaign. But before I get into that, just for a couple moments, I want to go off on one of my historical tangents like I do from time to time in these. I'm not trying to make a history video, but just I figure if folks are watching this game, they're also interested in the period, and sometimes things come up I just want to say about it. And this is something that I read last night. I've been reading about the Overland campaign, and I read a little passage in there that just kind of struck me, and I wanted to share it. And this concerns a Confederate general, cavalry general, named Thomas Rosser. 1864, during the Overland campaign, and which kind of takes place right through this area. I mean, this campaign map, when you get down to this level, is really just kind of an approximation, right? These roads don't actually, it's not like an actual map. The railroads actually ran a little different and everything. But kind of, up here, this is the Rappahannock River, and kind of starts here, and it, generally kind of progresses down in this direction of the south and east to close to Richmond. And during the course of all that, the armies had kind of gotten down into roughly this area and are soon going to fight the Battle of Cold Harbor. And all during this campaign, the cavalry, they have a lot of skirmishes and just cavalry fighting, kind of out in the flanks and the peripheries of the main armies. And one of these little clashes, just before the Battle of Cold Harbor, occurs about 15, maybe 20 miles north of Richmond at a little bitty town called Ashland. The Union Cav had kind of come up. There were some, not shown here, but there were a couple of bridges up in this area, railroad bridges, that, at least for the moment, were more important to the Confederates than to the Federals and their logistics. And so Union Cavalry came up here. They're going to try to wreck a couple bridges. And some Confederate cavalry comes up to stop them from doing that. And so there's a little cavalry battle. I mean, little in the big scheme of things. It was, a pretty intense firefight for the cavalry on both sides involved at this little town called Ashland, which is basically the first railroad stop on this railroad coming north out of Richmond. And still is today. You ride the Amtrak from Richmond up to D.C., and the first stop coming out of Richmond is Ashland. It's a pretty town, at least right around the railroad station it is. One Confederate cavalry division is in the area. Another Confederate cavalry division under Wade Hampton comes up behind the Union cavalry. And Hampton's lead brigade is commanded by Thomas Rosser. And when these guys come up behind the Federals, the first contact they make is Rosser's brigade basically ambushes the rear Federal regiment of this Union Cavalry Brigade that is currently facing toward Ashland, generally. And this rear Union regiment, it's a Connecticut cavalry regiment, and they get surprised, and Rosser's guys bag that Federal Brigade's kind of their supply train. and they grab some supply wagons. They take some prisoners. They get quite a few spare mounts, right? The cavalry's extra horses to rotate horses in. They get quite a few of those, and so there's a little success there. But the Federals kind of get their act together and turn and face, and some more cavalry from the more forward regiments come down. And, it's not a disaster for either side. But this is what struck me and why I wanted to talk about it. Rosser is describing this little event in his larger discussion of the battle that day. And I'm not paraphrasing, I'm reading it verbatim here. Quote, "The effect of this rear attack was to scatter the enemy in every direction. But, in doing so, I encumbered my men with prisoners, horses, and wagons." So his guys have met the success in this little ambush attack, and they've gotten some booty, but now they're a little disorganized. And then the Federals pretty quickly kind of get their crap together and mount a little counterattack. Whereupon Rosser writes, again, quote, "I had kept only 2 squadrons in the saddle unencumbered," unquote. And why that sticks out to me is the language he used. It turns out that he had another Virginia Cav regiment nearby, and they came up to him. They beat the counterattack back. So it wasn't a huge deal either way. And the battle continued on from there. But what struck me about what he wrote was he could very easily and acceptably and accurately have used language like, "The effect of this rear attack was to scatter the enemy, but in doing so, naturally, the men became encumbered with prisoners, horses, and wagons." And then right after that, he could have said, "At this juncture, there remained only 2 squadrons in the saddle unencumbered." He didn't say it that way. He said, "I had encumbered my men. I had kept only 2 squadrons in the saddle." And the Confederates came out perfectly fine in this, at least at this juncture of the battle. The end result was kind of half and half. It was kind of a draw. But at this particular point, it went well enough for the Confederates. He's not, having to explain away a mistake. He's not having to justify or describe. He's just describing what happened. And I had encumbered, I had kept. It's just subconsciously, I don't even read that he's making a point. Just the way he described it, he owned that situation that could have turned into a problem. It didn't, really, but he just owned it. And he didn't necessarily make specific orders to make that happen. It sounds like the kind of situation that could just naturally occur in the course of things. But even so, he just naturally took responsibility. There was just a little glimpse there into Rosser's one aspect of his personality as a commander in the way he described that. And it was something that I liked. And I just wanted to talk about it. Thought I would share. All right. Enough of that. So, here we are, Union Campaign. In our last episode, We fought this battle here in southern Kentucky. Polk had come up and attacked the 3rd Corps, which is Grant's Army of the Tennessee. Confederates were beaten back, and Polk's command is retreating as soon as I start time going. Back toward, it looks like it's probably going to Clarksville here. Meanwhile, the Mississippi Army of the Mississippi, under the command of James Stephen now, Lyon remains in command of this corps. They came down the river and took Memphis, and are currently in the process of capturing Memphis. So we're kind of making inroads on what I talked about in an earlier episode of kind of our near to midterm plan in Tennessee. Because there's some industrial sites along in here that we want some control of. With the Army of the Mississippi, he's in a bad supply situation, but he hasn't yet actually captured Memphis. I think once this turns Union, that may improve a little bit, but either way, he needs to build a supply depot probably. But we learned in a previous episode that you can mess up. It appears that if you build a supply depot, this happened to us somewhere in the Confederate campaign. I think it happened at maybe Cairo or Evansville. I don't remember, but if Lyons were to build a supply depot now, and if that supply depot were to actually complete before the capture is finished, Memphis is still considered a Confederate city. Which means that that supply depot would be considered a Confederate supply depot, and the AI might very well immediately abandon it and make it burn down. Got surprised by that not too long back in the CSA campaign, so I don't want to repeat that mistake. I'm going to wait a little bit. I don't know if I'm going to wait for the full capture, but I'm going to wait until it's pretty clear that the capture will complete before the supply depot will. Meanwhile, the initial plan for this force was, we're into winter. He's already in winter quarters up here. And going to build a fort and a supply depot to support moving on Nashville later when the weather improves again. But Polk has come up here, fought this battle, lost, and is retreating not back to Nashville, but to Clarksville. Clarksville, Clarksburg, Clarksville. This route is open. So it's winter. And let's see what the supply. And we're at yellow readiness, not green. And we're at 46% supply flow, which I need to turn on my supply and telegraph. And I don't know exactly where he's getting that supply from. But the way is open to Nashville, and there is a supply depot here. And Polk is now not in the way. So I'm going to go ahead and take the winter attrition and the less readiness, and let's winter at Nashville instead. It's kind of like, yeah, he's building this fort and supply depot, but I think those are superfluous now. The way is open to go grab our objective. There is some risk there because, that'll put Grant here. He only has the one corps in this army for now. Polk north of him. And then that opens up Kentucky. If that happens, well, we'll just have to deal with it. There is the Appalachian Army over here that could respond to that. I think it's worth the risk. I think with a federal force at Nashville, Polk may not want to go up to Kentucky. The AI may want to deal with this instead. So I'm just going to see what happens here. I'm going to move this 3rd Corps into Nashville. I don't think he will be able to use that railroad, but I'm going to enable it just in case he can. I'll bring the Army Commander down as well. So we'll see how that works out. Might be overextending a little bit, but might not. Meanwhile, the plan for the 4th Corps in West Virginia, he's going to complete building this fort, and then we're going to bring him over, and I want him to winter probably around Lexington. If Polk does come back up into Kentucky, he will be in a position to deal with that, at least keep Louisville safe. If not, though, the idea for 4th Corps is once winter is over, and I do feel like we need to wait for the weather for that one. But he's going to come down this route, and hopefully early next year, going to take Knoxville. Because of this, Thomas Riggins Iron Works, which is the biggest weapon-producing facility in the Confederacy. That's the plan for Appalachian Army. And that's McClellan commanding the Army and Heintzelman commanding the 4th Corps. This little engineering corps is under orders to come down to Beverly, build a fort here. I think the supply depot will support him in that. Could expose him a little bit. There are Confederate forces in the Shenandoah. If they come up to attack him, he'll just have to retreat. But because this is flipped and is now Union territory, not Confederate territory, they might leave him alone long enough to complete that fort. And then once that's done, he's going to come down and do the same thing at Lewisburg, kind of seal off West Virginia. And in the east, for the Army of the Potomac, I've moved 1st Corps under, who's under? Yeah, Hancock is commanding this corps now. He's down at Fredericksburg, building a supply depot and a fort for further operations around here, and hopefully we can get into Richmond in the spring. I was tempted to try to dash him down to take Richmond, but I knew that this Army of the Shenandoah, which is the biggest Confederate army, was somewhere in this area, and sure enough, he was spotted, and this is where apparently Joe Johnston is wintering that army. And then I've got 2nd Corps in this army kind of in a spot where they can respond back over into the Shenandoah, but is also within range to reinforce the 1st Corps down here if a battle occurs here. And the Army HQ, which is McDowell, is kind of in between the two. In Washington, we have an Army HQ established under Winfield Scott, which seemed appropriate. And within this command, we have not exactly a corps, but a corps' worth of units that have just been recruited. So they're not organized yet into divisions and everything. But this will eventually be the 6th Corps. And once they're all arrived and have undergone some training while they're stationary through the winter, get that corps organized. And then I'll chop that corps into the Army of the Potomac. And we'll have 3 corps here now. Which, as far as the Standard Infantry Corps, at least for the foreseeable future, I think that's about as big as the Army of the Potomac is going to get. I may add a cavalry corps of some type later if I have the weapons and to do so. But I'm going to see how this campaign goes with just a 3-corps army for Virginia. And the only other thing I've done naval-wise, the blockade squadrons are still doing their blockade thing. We are getting pretty close now. It's still a little bit of time away. But our first big batch of sail frigates, they're at about 70%. So it won't be too long before these ships are able to go out and kind of increase the size and therefore the effectiveness of the blockade squadrons. Tighten that blockade a little bit. We're actually not too far away from, well, yeah, we're just about at 96% on our first build of 8 ironclad monitors. I'm not 100% sure what I'm going to do with those. I think what I could do these 3 forts right here blocking the Cumberland and Tennessee rivers. Our little scouting squadrons can't do anything with these. But these are kind of minimum forts. 58 troops, 60 troops, 60 troops, and those are intel estimates. These are probably about 50 troops and 4 guns apiece. Kind of the minimum level fort, right? No additional brigade or anything like that. Like some of the bigger forts, some do have that. These do not. So instead of tying up Grant's army with sieging those down, I might make a squadron of those river ironclads to come down these, or rather come up these rivers and beat down the condition of these forts. We've had mixed success with that in the past, so we'll see. But and then we have this engineering corps, which is just a brigade or 2 with a few batteries. Currently building a fort at Cairo. But once he's done with that, the reason I put artillery in these things might be sufficient to besiege one of these smaller forts with the minimum default garrison, which is what these are. And if we put together an ironclad squadron to come up here and soften these forts up first, between that squadron and this engineering corps, they may be able to take out all these forts, and Grant doesn't have to worry about it. I think I'm going to do that. They're at 96%, but this is actual construction, not repairing. So I'm going to wait until they're fully 100% before I form that naval unit. But that won't take very long. The monitors don't have terribly high firepower. They're only 2 cannon apiece. They're good cannon. They're 11-inch naval rifles. So the 2 cannon they do have are pretty powerful. But it's not that many guns. And so it takes them a while to burn down a fort. Meanwhile, they are getting shot at. But what's notable about the monitor is, and it's not shown in game, neither is the gun caliber. You got to go to the manual for this stuff. but 7-inch thick iron armor. I can't say I've memorized every single ship in the game, but I think this is the most heavily armored ship in the game for either side. I think. If it isn't, it's pretty darn close. I don't remember seeing anything at that level of armor thickness. So it takes them a long time to beat down a fort, but they're pretty resilient while doing it. And the other nice thing about the monitor is that, unlike other later ironclads we're going to get that do have more firepower, the monitors are both sea and river capable. So that's pretty flexible. If I decide I want them out at sea somewhere else, I can do that. Potentially just by disbanding the squadron, putting them back in the ship pool, and then forming a new squadron somewhere else. Which is a little hokey, right? I mean, there is some abstraction in the naval side of things. You know, if I have ships on the Ohio River and the Confederates own the Mississippi, I really shouldn't be able to just disband the squadron and then basically teleport them somewhere on the coast. I guess there may be some canals that aren't shown on the map that kind of connect into the Great Lakes up here or something. But anyway, so that's some naval stuff. Let's get, well, I think I already gave the order for this guy, right? I did. So I think we've got our movement orders out. Let's get time rolling. 30 minutes into the darn episode. Yeah, I know I do that too much. I talk a lot. Ah! They are letting him use the railroad. That's cool. I don't know why Grant's HQ isn't moving. He got the order at the same time. There he goes. So let's see how Polk reacts to that. Oh, also we had captured and then repaired enough little Confederate steamers that I made another little scouting squadron. So we have Riveron 7 now forming at Cairo. Okay, the Confederates have gone Industrialization 2. That's going to open up some new weapons production for them. A new type of ironclad. I don't really know what kind. I actually forgot what policy I have. Breadbasket. Yeah, that makes sense. Improve our food production capacity via agricultural subsidies. Trent Affair, that's historical flavor. I don't think it affects gameplay in any way. How's Memphis going? Alright, Memphis is almost captured. I'm pretty confident that the capture will happen before the depot is completed. Let's get that going. And I'm kind of thinking that this force is going to remain here through the winter. Not only does he need to recover his supply situation, but also there is another corps in this army. It's just called the recruiting corps. And this isn't an independent force. This is just the additional units needed to bring 5th Corps up to the same organization as all the other forces. So, supply, weather, and then training these troops up, getting them downriver, and folding them in is what I'm going to do with the Mississippi Army before they do anything else. I think Memphis is a fine place to stay during the winter. And kind of the main reason I went from Memphis before I otherwise would have is this. The McElwain Company at Holly Springs, which is now Union owned and was one of the biggest, either the biggest or the second biggest, iron production facilities in the South. So they don't have that anymore. Suck on that, Jeff Davis. Nashville is captured. And that gives us not only Nashville, which is a nice 4 points, but it also gives us, well, maybe not. So there's Cumberland Furnace, and which apparently is under our control. It's another big iron production facility. But for some reason, he's hanging on to this facility. I guess that's because of the proximity of Polk's command. All right. What just happened here? Naval battle at... Oh. Haha. Okay. So I guess we just fought a little naval battle here on the James River. And as I've mentioned before, these little bitty squadrons are not intended for combat. They just have 3 little steamers apiece, and I just have them out and about to improve our vision. They're intel forces, really, scouting forces. But apparently they were strong enough to beat whatever Confederate force attacked them, which I don't see. All right, nice job there, Hampton Squadron. What? They may have been considered reinforced. Well, we don't see them because they disintegrated entirely. Where's the actual battle report, though? There it is. Okay, didn't sink or capture any ships. It made them retreat, and I guess because of our squadron here, our port here, our fort here, and this other, I guess they didn't have a path, and it just made them disintegrate. That's cool. Just make sure he didn't capture any. He didn't. Okay. Didn't take any damage either. Nice. Seems like there were a couple of other. Okay, there was also a naval battle in the Atlantic fought by the North Carolina blockade. We completely... Unless you're looking right at them, sometimes these naval battles, they're abstracted on the campaign map. Sometimes they slip right by and you don't even notice them. But apparently we captured another ship here. No, not that squadron. This squadron. CSS Jonaluska. Put him in our little pool for future service as a Union ship. Which means it needs to be USS, not CSS. Okay, our monitors are done. I'm going to form them. I think Evansville will be fine. I don't need to worry about the port level. To be honest, I don't really know how these really come into play. Because when you construct ships, it doesn't make you designate a specific port to construct a ship. You just kind of build the ships, and it takes it out of your shipyard capacity But at that point, they're not tied to a specific port. And then later, you can form a port you can form a squadron with already existing ships anywhere you want, as long as river or sea. But I don't have to worry about the capacity on forming the fleet because the ships are already built. There may be some supply ramifications to it, but I've never noticed that there to be a big problem. I'm just going to go ahead and form this fleet at Evansville, Indiana on the Ohio River. And I think David Farragut would be a good guy to put in charge of that fleet. And we'll put all 8 of them in there. To bust down a fort as quickly as possible, and you get 7 ships engaged at one time. At least that's the way it looks in the screen. So that's 7 ships to engage and 1 spare. 1 still may sink. It sometimes happens where they're fighting fine, but there's a lucky hit and they suffer an ammo explosion and they blow up. And that seems to be all ships seem to be occasionally prone to that. I'm just going to call this River Monet. So when they're ready, actually they will be ready, they're up here. By the time this corps finishes this fort and is ready to come down here and get involved, I think this fleet will be ready by then. Can't do anything with these two. They're little and they're crappy ships. If I moved them south, they would just get completely annihilated by these forts. What's kind of interesting, though, is when I bring these monitors down and then back up the Tennessee, when he gets about here, which fort is he going to engage? They're equidistant. I don't know how that's going to work out. Or will he wind up engaging both forts at once? I hope not. I don't want to do it too soon. I mean, if I come down right now, if they were ready, and beat a fort down to low percentage, low condition, but I'm not ready to move this little force down, well, then they'll just be building the condition back up in that interval. So we'll wait a little bit on that. Okay, Polk. This circle is completely independent of this army. They're just building another, well, they're building another ironworks, which will also be under the radius of Nashville. So, okay. Polk isn't going to be there probably that long. Still working on his supply depot. And get time rolling again. I paused it looking at that Navy stuff. Okay, now let's see what Third Corps supply situation is. 100%. And he's drawing from this captured supply depot and from the port at Nashville. That's fine. So for now, that has worked out. And our fort and supply depot are deteriorating. However, this supply depot and this telegraph are showing Confederate now. And yeah, Grant and Reynolds. Reynolds is the Corps commander here now when Grant got promoted. They've lost their telegraph connection buff. Which is okay. Capturing Nashville that's acceptable for now. How's McClellan doing on... Okay, they are done with Fort Davis. Fort Pillow also... No, I decided not to put extra troops in that one. I'm not sure we really need to put extra troops in this one, too. I think it's fine just with the default garrison, but I'll get a political guy in here. He's pretty decent. I'm going to save him for a field army. Yeah. Franz Siegel, maybe. How about this guy? Ah. Our support is so high in Massachusetts. He'd be a good candidate as far as the abilities. He's not that good. It's fine to... Kentucky? Oh, no. I want Rousseau in the brigade command somewhere. 3 stars in leadership. Do I care about Kansas support? Just take a quick look at the heat map here. Okay, so ideally we'd want... So basically the border states, including New Jersey, they're a little bit lower. Well, we've got 98% support in Massachusetts. I don't really need more. You know, I'd rather do some of these lower ones. 80, 71, 76. Now, Kansas is low compared to the others, 63%, but do we really care that much about Kansas manpower? Well, how do we... I'm not going to actually recruit anything, but let's see. This is the only way I know to bring up a view of manpower available, is to go into the brigade recruitment. So West Virginia 2,000, Kentucky 3,000, Missouri 1,000, which isn't necessarily indicative. I mean, maybe it would be better to look at the combined men fielded and pool. So about 9,000 for Missouri, about 9,000 for Kentucky. Where's Maryland? About 6,000 from Maryland. A little over 1,000 for Delaware. And Kansas, not even 1,000. Between current troops and available manpower. 0 available manpower. So even though support in Kentucky is low, it doesn't really hurt us that much because there's just not that many Kansas troops in the Army, and there aren't going to be anytime soon. However, 9,000 troops and a lot of recruits in Kentucky and Missouri, and they're both below. So we want a Missouri or a Kentucky officer, I think. I forgot what darn fort we're working on. This one, Fort Davis. Okay, so let's see if we can... So Rousseau, he's a Kentucky officer. I just don't want to put a 3 leadership guy in a fort. Nor do I want to put someone who's got 2 stars in everything from Missouri. I decided I'm not going to prioritize Kansas. The other way you can do this is there is a filter up here. So let's just and we want to look at Kentucky. I guess I skipped over Missouri somewhere. All right, what do we got here? We have Franz Siegel. It's possible. Decided I don't want to use either of these 2 guys. Okay, now we're talking. All right, let's go with Garrard, Kentucky support. And those are his stats aren't so high that I want to use them somewhere else. I don't know that I really want to use Siegel anywhere else either. Yeah, he's got 2 stars. I'll save him. I might need him later. We're building more corps. And I didn't really look at the commanders of those recruited units. I want to remember to find Rousseau a job somewhere in them, though. Okay, enough of that. And, well... There wasn't much action in this episode, but it's been going long enough. I think I better call it to a close. There was a lot of me talking, but, you know, we have a plan coming together. It's winter. Things are going to slow down. We're kind of where we want to be in Virginia. I was hoping that this first corps would extend its influence and flip this facility blue. Another ironworks here. I think this is the biggest iron production facility in the South. And I think when he first moved here, it was, but maybe I think Joe Johnston being here probably flipped it back. So we are where we want to be in Virginia. McClellan is the Army commander. The Corps commander is Heinzelman. They've done their fort. We got the Kentucky guy in command there. So I'm going to go ahead and tell him to move to, where was it I wanted him to go? Lexington. And we will enable river and rail movement for that. So he'll actually get there pretty quick, I think. Okay, this engineering corps got to where I wanted him. He is in full supply because of that conveniently left supply depot that Johnny Reb built for us in central West Virginia. That helped. Thanks, Johnny Reb. So let's get a fort going here. Maybe a little overextended, but we've taken Nashville. That was an objective. And these guys are in good supply for the winter. Got a little plan here for these forts between this corps and the river monitors. And we have captured Memphis. Not in great shape down here right now, but that'll correct pretty soon, I think. Oh, the other thing we can do is, now that this fort has been captured, let's move this little scouting river squadron down to... I'm going to bring them to here. And let's see if that will give us a little bit better vision on what's going on with this Confederate Army of Mississippi, which is only showing 250. So I guess it's an army that recruited one artillery battalion so far. But maybe we'll get better intelligence once that river squadron gets down here. And actually, our new scouter, Riveron 7, is also ready now. So Riveron 3 is kind of watching this area on the approaches to St. Louis. I don't really have another good spot, but I'm going to tell Riveron 7 to come all the way down the Mississippi and then go back up the Arkansas River and see if maybe he can get some spots on these two Confederate armies. I don't think there's a fort or anything along the way that he's going to run into. I don't think. I could be wrong. Okay, that will do for this episode. And we'll continue on and see these plans develop when we come back in the next episode. Thank you very much for watching.